Welcome to this week's episode of Lifts. We're in the beginning of June. Summer's upon us. I can't believe we're in the middle of the year now, and I'm changing my workout routine. So I'm ready for the beach in a couple of weeks. I'm off on my vacation, so I'm just trying to do what I can to get that beach body going, Mo. What's happening in your side of the world?
Well, I'm actually out on the beach. We came out last weekend out to East Hampton, which is where we spend most of our summers here for about 10 to 12 weeks. It's been gorgeous. It's been in the 70s. So we're kind of escaping the DC heat, but I went for a run on the beach today. I probably have to change my workout though to get a bit more lean. I'm just curious, Matthew, what do you do differently to get the beach body that you don't typically do during your workout?
Well, it's all, as you know, it's all as our guest this week. I'm sure will take us on a very different level, but it's predominantly around diet. Just doing a little bit more running, not just because the weather's great, and I like to go out. I work out in the evening, so it's nice to get out when you've kind of got these longer, summery style evenings for a run, and just kind of upping the weights a little bit. But that's about all. Nothing too crazy.
Well, I'm excited to introduce our guest this week for this week's episode of Lifts, who I actually had a chance to recently meet. We spoke over the phone. This is the first time I'm seeing you, Eric, on video, but we have Eric Durak. And Eric Durak has as much experience, I think, as you, Matthew, 35 years of experience in health promotion, clinical exercise, research. And he has really come out, he's taken on this task of kind of reinventing our healthcare system. He's worked with health clubs on education, on HSA, on payments and technology. And more recently, he's actually just announced a book, which I believe came out last week, primarily built around GLP-1 and really helping educate the industry on, on how to meet the need and meet the consumer where they're at with GLP-1. So, Eric, welcome to episode 34 of Lifts. We're excited to have you on.
Well, it's nice to see both of you. I mean, Matthew and I go back a couple of years. He was my first big podcast, and I was actually down in Orange County for that. That was a fun trip for sure. And Mo, we met last week on the phone, had a very enlightening conversation. And you're right. This whole issue of GLP and Ozempic and the whole weight loss craze is kind of storming the industry. And I spoke with one of my colleagues, Eric Malzone, who has his tech podcast about doing something for the industry in terms of education. Because I have a unique background. My first job in California here in Santa Barbara. And by the way, Matthew, the weather here is terrible. We have not had sun in Santa Barbara literally in months. I swear
I
to
was up there
God.
last week with Angel Banyos actually. So
Yeah,
it was
it was
you
it
had
was
that kind of gray thing going
yeah,
on.
it's cloudy. It's been cloudy since February. So I got to move to the desert someplace. But anyway, but the whole GLP thing is interesting because everybody wants to be involved with it. And of course, we spoke a little bit at URSA in Los Angeles, and I had a chance to speak with quite a few industry people. I was at the ACSM conference in Chicago in February, and their keynote speech was on weight loss drugs and how the industry needs to be ready. They essentially, one of the speakers said, this is coming and you better be ready. It's almost like there's a tsunami coming, and the industry has to be on their toes. And everybody wants to make money from it, but I take a little bit more clinical and conservative approach that you have to understand the medication, the timing of the medication, the amount of medication, exercise history, amount of weight you want to lose, how much food they're eating, calories, types of calories, hydration, which is one of the more important things. And I put it all together into a reasonably small book. And I'm already, I mean, I said to Mo last week, I picked up my books a week ago Friday, and I've sent out 2 sales orders just this week for large health club chains. So I think 6 months from now we'll have a fairly robust amount of industry club chains who are going to be involved with this.
Well, we're excited to hear that, and we want to get into that for sure. But to kick off this week's episode, We are coming fresh out of Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference, which happened yesterday. So I'm not sure when this episode is going to come out, but we're recording this episode the day after the Apple Worldwide Developer Conference. And typically, this is for those of you who might not be aware, Apple has this event typically in early June, and it's when they announce all their new software updates. So they have usually other times in the year, they launch devices in the fall. They kind of in two periods, in the spring and the fall, but then they have this big session where they announce all the software upgrades, the new iOS versions, and things like that. Now, typically, it's around cool features with the new OS for iPhone, for Mac, and very little on fitness. However, this time there's a significant update to Apple Watch OS, which I think is really going to challenge a lot of wearable companies like Oura, Whoop, and others. And here's what's new. So coming out this fall, and it's probably going to support the Apple Watch that you have. They're launching a new app called the Vitals app. This is a brand new app for the iPhone and the Apple Watch, and it takes sleep analysis with the Apple Watch to the next level. So I know Matthew and I are big fans of Aura. I'm not sure, Eric, if you have a wearable of choice. We're constantly comparing how good or bad our scores are, and if we're traveling together, they're usually good and bad at the same time because we're following like the same schedule.
Right.
But Apple Watch now tracks heart rate, respiratory rate. It will track wrist temperature. It will track sleep duration, sleep endurance, blood oxygen, on and on. But it also gives you messaging, and it kind of provides context into what you could change in your life to improve those measures. So it's kind of taking what Aura gives you, which is the reporting, but then it takes a step further, which is saying what can it change to improve that, telling you when to have caffeine, when not to have caffeine, and so on. They're also improving tracking during pregnancy. And here's another big feature: training load. So training load traditionally has been found in watches like Polar and other endurance watches, Sunto, Coros, and others, where they're really looking at your load over time with primarily around cardiovascular activity, and they will give you a strain number. Whoop actually has a strain number as well. Apple Watch is not going to do this. So with this one update, they potentially are impacting the endurance watch category, the fitness watch category, fitness watch focused bands as well. And I really like this other new feature which they have, which is they're allowing you to pause on the completion of your ring. So, as most people listening to this podcast know, that progress is made from periods of exertion, but also periods of recovery and rest, and that's really where growth happens. But on the Apple Watch, if you wear an Apple Watch, the rings are like continuous, right? So, if you want to maintain your streak, you have to close your rings every single day. Well, that doesn't really matter if you want to have a rest day. So if you have a rest day, you kind of break the streak. So it doesn't encourage the right behavior that you want to improve your fitness and wellness. With this update, they give you a chance to pause. So you can call a rest day or a rest week, and it's not going to break your streak. So this is pretty big news. And there's also other integrations around Apple Intelligence, which is Apple's new AI. And they're also adding in ChatGPT as well. So lots to talk about here. And Eric, I'm going to put the first question to you, but given what you know about the gym chain and fitness and how you're kind of nudging people towards the right behavior, Apple is such a mass market based product. With the Apple Watch, is this a step in the right direction now that we have big tech and a wearable that you're wearing on your wrist to give you insights that were previously available to very specific devices like an Aura or a Whoop? Do you think this could help people?
Well, I'm a huge fan of sleep only because I don't get enough. So any type of wearable or trackable that would help with not just sleep duration, but aspects of sleep is a big deal. I really like the heart rate, temperature, and blood oxygenation. People, the whole heart rate variability, some of these very simple measurements, people don't really pay too much attention to. And I think that's just having two or three simple metrics that the trainer can work on with clients, that they can actually learn to do it, is going to be a nice behavior change, because sleep, oxygen, blood, and temperature are really interesting. And your temperature is probably going to change the more fit you become. Your sleep pattern should probably improve the more fit you become. And I'm assuming that the blood oxygen content is O2 saturation, which again
That's
should
right.
improve both at rest, at rest when you're fit. So yeah, I think they're all very interesting, and it's right there on your watch, and you can just play with it. So from a consumer standpoint, I I'm interested in. Now, I don't know that much about the training load side that you just mentioned, but it's very intriguing because my many years of experience in gyms is that a lot of people go in and exercise, but they keep a real baseline level of intensity. So if the watch can actually give guidelines in terms of training loads and sort of pushing you in the direction, hey, you didn't do this, at this period of time, you might want to up your load or up your sets, reps, et cetera, also can be a good thing because people will always, people are creatures of habit. They have tendency to do the same thing over and over again. So if technology can help them make one or two small changes, and that's sort of the big issue in behavior is one or two small changes over time, you're moving in the right direction.
What are your thoughts? First question came into my mind is accuracy compared to, so Whoop and Aura. They make some claims about the quality of the accuracy. I know Aura in particular is where the ring is positioned on your finger, etc. What do you know, Mo, about how this is likely to compete from a quality of information based on the fact that it's pulling it from your wrist via their watch?
So I think this has less to do. So two things. One, I believe the ring is still one of the best locations to capture data, mostly because there's less noise, there's less bone and other type of material for you to get to the blood vessels. When you look at the wrist, it has the LED lights has to really shoot through it and they have to do a lot of correction to take the noise out. So the ring's a great location. But outside of that, when you're looking at all other wrist-based wearables, Apple's done a really good job. The one key difference, and I don't know if this is going to be reflected on the update, is something called the sample rate. So, and when you capture the data, so when you look at an Aura or a Whoop or a Polar or these other fitness-based devices, they have all day heart rate tracking, or if they don't have all day heart rate tracking, they definitely track heart rate throughout your sleep entirely. The Apple Watch takes a sample every 5 seconds. So that's a big difference. So you look at all day real time you're tracking, and that's why the Apple Watch, and they have to do that because the OS isn't really optimized as well as these other devices. So in order for the watch to last more than a day, they can't do all the heart rate tracking. So there's pros and cons to that. It only does all the heart rate tracking during an actual physical activity where they turn the LEDs on the whole time. So that's one key difference. But in terms of the sensor quality themselves and the quality of the data that's coming out, it's top notch. So much research and data has been done around the Apple Watch sensors versus what you find on other devices. And in fact, the Apple Watch in a lot of cases outperforms it. It's a matter of how those sensors are now activated. So that's one thing I'm curious about. So when you think about a metric like sleep, Eric, you're talking about HRV, getting your lowest HRV at the point of sleep is a very key indicator. I'm looking at skin temperature. When do you capture that? So a lot of it is really timing around the right point during your sleep cycle to capture that, your circadian rhythm and how that kind of aligns with
Right.
where your own body clock should be. So a lot of these metrics is really around one, the quality of the sensor. So I give Apple an A+ for that. It's not going to get any better. But the second part of it is what kind of algorithms you're applying. And I think right now, from what I'm seeing, the dedicated fitness trackers or Whoop and others are still probably going to be a step ahead. But here's the important point is now that these features are going to be made available on the Apple Watch, it opens up an entirely new possibility to consumers to educate them on something that they might not be aware of. And Eric, going back to what our conversation on the phone was last week, even around GLP-1, you've got people who have an Apple Watch who might also be on a GLP-1 medication and they've never set foot in the gym. And I think that's a pretty large number. Like how many people have a wearable, now have these good insights, they're now taking a weight loss medication, but they've never set foot into the gym. So I think for our industry, these advances in technology, these advances in drugs is really an opportunity for us if we know how to leverage them.
I think that trainers are going to embrace the technology and they need to teach the technology to their clients. And I don't know, I'm not nearly as tech savvy as you are, and I would not even begin to estimate the percentage of people who are on Ozempic who are really, really tech savvy. But I would say that it's a fairly high percentage. And I think that they would like something like this, especially if the trainer can say to them, we're going to be tracking your weight loss with our body composition measures, but a lot of your day-to-day variables that we're going to be looking at, like heart rate variability, body temperature, et cetera, are going to be right on your watch. And we want to use them every session. Then you're going to start to see a behavior change because they're going to constantly be looking at these metrics.
I think that sort of fits well into the next story we've got here, which is venture studio Squared Circles lands a $40 million investment to launch science-backed lifestyle brands. I don't know who Squared Circles is or really too much about what they do, but I was watching a video on YouTube last night where they mentioned that El Caterton led the round, extending their partnership following their involvement in Squared Circles seed funding. So Mo, do you know anything about these guys?
Yeah, I just know a little bit about them. Obviously, we know El Caterton very well. They're heavily invested and have partnered with so many great brands in our industry. What I think this does is, so Squared Circles is a venture studio where they essentially get funding. They've hit some home runs, so they were able to raise another round to really innovate around the things that we've been talking about. So the stuff that Eric's been talking about that we just in the last segment, speaking about the Apple Watch and GLP-1, the idea behind this is, can they come up with health and well-being initiatives and new concepts such as that it might make some new consumer technology out of it? Because I think what's happening in our industry is there is this idea that have we plateaued? Is innovation slowing down? I certainly think it is. I think innovation is slowing down a little bit. We're constantly chasing after the next kind of idea. People are looking at gaming. They're kind of chasing AI a little bit. But we need to think fresh, and we have to have fresh new ideas and fresh new concepts. And from what I can understand with what Squared Circle is doing, they're focused on two key areas, which is skin and health innovation. And they've already kind of proven this with some successful businesses. But for the first time, they're also going to be using an AI-powered process to help license some of its intellectual property and kind of select who the right people are to come in. So I think it's going to be funds like this that have a bit of a blank check to think, with a clean sheet of paper to come up with what the next generation of health innovation is going to look like.
The wait is over. Our new Escape Fitness catalog has landed. This is the essential guide to all of the latest product innovations that are shaping the future of functional training. Bigger and better than ever, this year's catalog is 190 pages, jam-packed with everything from eye-catching, bespoke functional training frames to some of the latest strength training equipment. So sign up today to receive the digital version today. So what are you waiting for? Go to escapefitness.com now.
I was watching a podcast just last week actually about this, and it was quite interesting because the two buzzwords whenever you turn on the TV is Ozempic or the versions of it and AI. And when it comes to business opportunities, this guy was basically taking you through the last sort of 15 or 20 years and the terminology that people use. And, it went from big data, and he gave a number of examples of other terms that people are using within their businesses, whatever type of business that you've got. And by sort of, claiming to integrate these sort of technology concepts within their businesses, they were going out and raising a lot of money. And I just wonder, and we'll come on to the Ozempic one in a minute, but I just wonder when it comes to AI, like this company clearly has their advantage is this AI powered process that sets itself apart by licensing bioscience intellectual property, which enables the creation of highly targeted products and experiences. But watching this podcast, there seems to be a lot of these companies that have raised a ton of money claiming the access to unique data, consumer insights, and many of the brands that he was talking about, these are big consumer brands, and a huge percentage of them had actually failed in delivering meaningful returns to the investors. And so I just wonder about the hype around a lot of this stuff, and whether a lot of these companies are really delivering meaningful results, and how far do we actually sort of get sidetracked on some of these things? And if you look at what Apple are doing, for an example, they're quite late to the game when it comes to, like Whoop have been around for a long time, Aura have been around for a long time, but then, Apple seemed to sit back and watch, including AI. They were quite late to come out with AI, but you're just wondering, do you sort of sit out and watch a lot of these companies come and burn through a lot of money, and then be very sort of selective of when you jump in, and come in almost like towards the end when people have sort of paid a lot of money to figure it out?
I think there's some truth there. Here are some real facts. AI has had almost $1 trillion of investment into it, $1 trillion. When you look at the infrastructure and everything else, but only $10 billion in revenue. That's it. So $1 trillion of investment going into it, but yet only $10 billion of revenue. However, with that said, you've got to kind of be in now. This kind of people make a lot of parallels to the birth of the internet, or the early days of the internet, looking at the 90s. And people said, this is when Cisco kind of had their rise and downfall. And people invested in Cisco like what NVIDIA is today, and said, well, Cisco's the infrastructure behind the internet, so I'm going to really invest in that because you're going to need Cisco routers and hubs and all these things. And then people backed out because they saw the crash happen, but then everything went back up again. But very few players made it. But the ones that made it, Google, Amazon, eBay, Cisco, they were already in there. So it's one of the things to know, to say who's doing the right thing versus who's just here to raise money without having a true business concept ahead of them. So I do think that there's a lot of money going into AI right now. And I'm sure when you look back at this 5 years from now, very few companies that are raising all this capital are still going to be around. But some of them that are doing it are going to be bigger than ever and be highly influential in our industry and beyond. But you also mentioned GLP-1, Matthew, and you sent this other article, I think last night, around him and hers. I'm in a very similar concept. Everyone is hopping on to this GLP-1 bandwagon. I think it's a term we can call it. But I read this article and I thought it was pretty interesting. They had this big press release that they're selling this GLP-1 drug 85% less than what you can get from a pharmaceutical grade, but it's a compound GLP-1 supplement. What's interesting about some of these press releases and articles is that they're talking about the thing like it's new, like it's innovative, but it's really not. Compounds, Eric, as I'm sure you can talk about, has been around for a long time. This is not a new innovation. There's nothing new that him and hers is doing. But Eric, would love to kind of get your thought. A lot of companies, in this case, him and hers, are hopping on the GLP-1 bandwagon. Similar to AI, everyone seemingly needs to have an AI story. Everyone seemingly needs to have a GLP-1 story. Do you think that the market is really frothy right now? Or from what you're saying, you just wrote a book on it, so be curious to get your take. Or do you think that, no, there is a there behind this?
Wow, it's such a great story, because I'm hearing people in the health and fitness industry say, well, they want to get into the GLP space so they can work with pharmacists and online pharmacies and physician groups to actually get the prescription drug to the health club. So they want to be this intermediary. And I didn't read the him and hers story, but I've heard about tirzepatides and semaglutides and whatever that are selling at much less than what we would consider pharmacy. And of course, the word on the street is, well, they're not that good. They're not as effective. And one thing I will say about GLP-1 and GIP drugs in its essence is, over the first, I don't know, few months of usage, these medications work pretty well. People lose an awful lot of weight, and it's up to the health and fitness industry to determine the body composition of where that weight loss is coming from. How it's being sold, it's going to be so big, Mo, that I think you're going to get all kinds of companies. They're going to come in with less and less. 85% less, that's a big drop. If someone said, hey, I can do this for 25% less than your local pharmacy, it may be the same grade of medication. I don't know. I mean, I got to be honest with both of you. There's so much information that comes out on GLP every single day that I'm having trouble keeping up with it. And Mo, I told you my book came out a week ago. I'm already doing research for my second edition. and I haven't really sold the first one yet, but there's so much information here. So I do agree. Everyone's going to be in the market, and I think the health clubs are really at a precipice of one of their biggest opportunities in the history of the industry.
Well, that's really true, right? But I think back to this particular one, this is a compound. So again, there are the pharmaceutical grade like Eli Lilly, Nova, like the traditional Ozempic kind of stuff that you hear about, which is paid for by insurance, which is anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 a month.
Yep.
Then you've got these compounds, which are not prescription or pharmacy grade, which I think are nearly as effective as the pharmaceutical grade, but you had to pay for them out of pocket. That's the other big difference. Insurance is
Right.
not going to cover compounds right now, and there's a lot of debate around how long should insurance cover GLP-1, and are people then, if they lose coverage, just going to shift to compounds, which then brings you to the next question around how long should people be on GLP-1? Is it healthy to be on it forever? I mean, I think the answer is unknown, but most people would say that you should not. We actually have another story here, which a good friend, which you all know, Mike Hansen, talked about around how consumers are shifting their wellness wallet. He's been talking about this for some time, and Matthew and I find this really interesting because consumers are spending, and it looks like this is an article that he wrote for Athletic News, but because of this weight loss drug, people are spending more money, willing to invest more, a bigger share of their wallet towards wellness. And this article states $205 per month. And I just spoke to him last night. He said the number now is closer to $270 a month that people are spending. So I'm just wondering, for our industry, given that consumers are now spending, I think, more than ever into wellness, how can a gym or a fitness brand take as much of that wellness wallet as possible, because they are in many ways the best situated to serve that consumer?
Right. Well, one of the things I talk about in my manual is the use of health savings account dollars through employers and flexible spending account dollars. And many people in the health club world don't even know that their HSA dollars can apply for programs. And I know that the Health Fitness Association was just in Washington, D.C., trying to lobby for the FIT Act, which may help to use HSA dollars for memberships. But the money is already available for programs, which may be up to 8 times more per month, which actually may cover something like a GLP medication or the program ensuing that they're taking the medication for. So it's all relatively new, but I've been working with a colleague, Jason Paul from Lifecore Group in Phoenix, and he's been working on this for years. So it's something that the industry can wrap their heads around. And I'll say one last thing about Jason's company. Within the next year, he's going to be starting the nation's first wellness health plan, which may pay for these things in their entirety for a specific period of time, which again has been in the works for a number of years. So,
well, we'll move on to the last story, and this I guess follows on to the conversation about the share of wallet and really, I suppose, how we evolve from. You mentioned, what does this mean for gyms? But I guess it's evolving from the core product and seeing what other items that are complementary, where people would probably go outside the gym doors, but not too far away from the gym doors to get some of these essential things that are part of the, of your wellness spend. We talked about at the beginning, you sort of said, what are you doing differently? And nutrition was a big part of that. If you look at there's a story I picked up from the grocer just this week, and it's Iceland and MyProtein launched the world's first frozen protein meal vending machine. I don't know a huge amount about this story, but what I do know is in England, Iceland's a big sort of frozen food grocery store, or they were. MyProtein previously, although it seems as though they've evolved now, but MyProtein used to essentially sell protein and nutritional supplements, and then Fitness First is one of the leading health club chains in the UK and at one point around the world. So they've got these really nice vending machines where you go into the gym. Whether you sort of previously used to leave the gym and go to somewhere like an M&S or wherever and pick up a meal to go home and stick it in the microwave. Well, now you can actually do that from the gym. And I think it's an interesting thought because one MyProtein, big brand, so certain amount of credibility behind that. Depending on how this is, and I'll be curious to get, maybe we can get Justin on, but curious to see how this is integrated into the story within Fitness First. But arguably, if there's some communication and handoff about the meals and what you should eat and when you should eat and how you should eat it, I think it's a really nice thing to do, because nobody really understands what to eat, and from a diet perspective to complement the different types of training programs. And I think this is a very smart idea. And the other thing that's pretty cool is it's vending. So there's no, minimal staff. There's no requirements to have kitchens and everything like that. And there seems to be a very well known and well respected company that's actually filling these up and providing the food. So quite a smart idea, and something that I've not seen done before.
Well, look, Justin, I think, has been at Fitness First as their CEO for less than a year, and I've been seeing more and more about Fitness First coming out since he's gone there. So kudos to him for making yet another good move. I love this idea. I mean, here in the US, one, you talk about M&S, and for our audience who might not be familiar, that's Mark and Spencer. That's what he's talking about here, which is a store, a well-known store in the UK. But in the US, there's been a lot of movement for, I'd say, about 15 years, where you've had more real food, not frozen food. So let's just say more ready-to-eat food be found in freezers. So I'm, from the DC area, there's a company called Territory Foods out there. I think they're now national, but you could find them in gym freezers where you could pre-order, and you can, and the food shows up. But it's cost prohibitive. It is expensive. I've tried. It's expensive. This one's about £5, so maybe about $6 or $7 per meal. A lot more affordable, frozen, more accessible in a larger gym. Territory Foods is typically found in very boutique, like CrossFit gyms or some more premium kind of gyms. So I really like what this is going. And here's the other thing, looking back at our last segment, how do you get a bigger share of that members' wellness wallet? So if your gym is, and I believe Fitness First is, it's about 50 to 70 pounds, per month, but that member is going to spend 150, 200 pounds per month. They're not going to be spending, let's just say, another 20 or 30 more pounds within your facility. How can you get them to spend even more? Because if they're going to spend it anyways, they might as well spend it with the brand that they trust, with the right trainers or community who knows them the best, in a lot of ways, maybe even better than their own GP. So I think this is a great move. I mean, Eric, would love to get your thoughts.
It's interesting because from the standpoint of people who are on GLP-1s, Mo, they don't eat anything. They forget to eat. There are days that go by that they don't eat. So the trainer is going to have to be part of the conduit to help them to get into nutritious foods. And one of the big things that I write in the book is the right type of protein at the right time of the day. And that's going to be, I think, the most important thing. So I don't know about this, but Matthew, it sounds like a very intriguing thing that could actually be applied in the club setting to GLP patients.
Well, we are at time for this week's episode of Lift. I mean, Eric, it's a pleasure to have you on. In our last segment, we'd love to get a takeaway from this week's episode. So, Eric, I'm going to have you go first. What is a key takeaway for our audience for this week?
Well, from what I've been able to glean from this, we've got the application of technology. We have the application of some food products moving into the health club, moving into the client. And my takeaway is if any of these parcels can help people, A, get to the gym, stay in the gym, and improve their fitness in the gym, it's a home run.
And Matthew, how about you as you're preparing for that beach body in the next 2 weeks? Any key takeaways that you have from this week?
It's really a fascinating time, and you're almost like every week we do this episode. You see things unfolding in front of your eyes. Like Eric, you mentioned, GLP-1. You've just done your first book, and now you're thinking about the second one, AI. Mo and I talk about this almost like every week, and something new comes in that gets you to rethink where you're going. So super excited, and with my business hat on, I think it's just about timing. I think you've got to keep an eye on these ideas. I think there's definitely people that are going to run out in front and, as they say, take all the arrows and create a lot of lessons. And I think the art and there's no sort of secret way of doing this, but I think the art is just figuring out your timing and when, obviously moving forward, taking advantage of the opportunities is key, but exactly how and what and when is really the skill. And, maybe that's the point of listening to these podcasts. You can sort of sense check when that's right to make a move. Mo, your final thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, just like you, we keep on learning stuff every week. I think my key thought is you've got to have a strategy and you've got to be flexible. You can't ignore the things we're talking about today, right? So we talked about wearables with the Apple Watch and what they announced yesterday. We talked about GLP-1. We've talked about AI. And if you're sitting on the sidelines where it's not even a part of your business plan, your strategic objectives, and you just have no process in place, I think you're going to be an outlier. And I just don't think you're going to be a relevant business or company or serving the best needs of your member in the years to come. So my key takeaway is get educated, get informed, listening to podcasts like us, listening and purchasing Eric's book, by the way, to educate your gym and your team. You have to stay on top of these things more than ever.
Well, thanks for listening to this week's episode of Lifts. We're going to put a link of Eric's book into the comment section. We'll also include it in the email that we'll send out. If you're not registered, and please register to get the details of these podcasts every week. If you like what you've heard, then please do us a favor and share it so we can get this out to more people. And something that I just learned this week: if you're actually watching it on YouTube and you click a like and subscribe, then you'll not only get more information about these podcasts, but it will share with you other similar podcasts that talk about similar things to what we do as well. So I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks very much for listening.